Chapter 1. The Girl. The bridge stood at the edge of the quiet town, old and forgotten, though it creaked when someone walked on it, and the river below whispered softly, carrying reflections of the moon. Most people stopped crossing it years ago, when a new concrete bridge was built nearby. But every evening, a young woman came and sat on the wooden railing, facing the water. Her name was Clara. Clara had been blind since she was 9. The world for her was sound, scent, and touch, not shape or color. Every night she came to the bridge because it was the only place where she could feel the wind moving freely. She listened to it, as if the sky itself was talking to her. That evening, she arrived with her small cane and a little bag of breadcrumbs. She always brought them for the ducks that lived near the river. She smiled when she heard their wings splash. Someone else was already on the bridge that night, a man tall and silent, leaning on the railing. He was around 60, with gray hair and eyes that carried too many winters. His name was Thomas. The townspeople knew him as the old soldier who never spoke much. Clara stopped when she sensed someone nearby. She turned her head toward the sound of a slow breath and the faint rustle of a coat. "Hello," she said softly, her voice calm like the wind. "I didn't mean to bother you. I just come here to feed the ducks." Thomas didn't answer at first. He wasn't used to people talking to him. After a moment, he said, "You're not bothering me." His voice was low, rough but kind. Clara smiled. "Good," she said. Then she threw a handful of crumbs toward the sound of the river. The ducks made happy noises, and Clara laughed quietly. Thomas watched her. He realized she was blind when she turned her face toward him, but her eyes didn't focus. Still, there was something bright about her, a kind of light that didn't need the sea to shine. He said, "You come here often?" "Every evening," Clara answered. "The river sings at night. I like to listen." Thomas looked down at the water. He had never thought of the river as singing. To him, it was just noise. But now, listening carefully, he began to hear it differently, like a melody beneath the surface. Clara tilted her head. "You sound lonely," she said. He hesitated. "Maybe I am." She smiled again. "That's all right. The stars are lonely too, but they still shine." He almost laughed. That was the first time in years someone made him feel like smiling. They stayed silent for a while, both listening to the water. The wind grew colder, but neither moved. When Clara stood up to leave, she said, "I come here every night at 7. You can come too, if you want. The river always sounds better when someone listens with you." Thomas didn't answer. He watched her walk away slowly with her cane tapping the ground. Something inside him, something long asleep, stirred. The next evening, he came again. Clara was already there, sitting with her legs crossed, humming softly. She smiled when she heard his steps. "You came back," she said. He nodded, though he realized she couldn't see him. "Yes, I did." "Good," said Clara. "The ducks missed you." He chuckled softly. "I doubt that." They shared quiet laughter. She asked him about his life, and he told her little pieces, that he once worked far away, that he traveled too much, and that now he just wanted peace. He didn't say war. He didn't say loss, but she felt it in his pauses. She told him she was learning to play piano again after many years. "When I play," she said, "it feels like painting with sound. Each note is a color only I can see." Thomas listened, imagining the way her fingers move across invisible keys. He realized how much beauty he had stopped noticing. The smell of river water, The sound of night birds. The way the wind changed direction before rain. At the end of the second night, Clara said, "Sometimes I wonder what the stars look like. They look like tiny candles in the dark," he said. She smiled gently. "Then I suppose I don't need to see them. I can feel them." A week passed. Thomas came every night. He began to look forward to it, to the sound of Clara's soft humming, to the way she could find beauty in things he thought were long dead. She brought stories, laughter, and even silence that felt alive. He hadn't spoken this much to anyone in years. One night, it began to rain. Clara came anyway, wearing a small hat and holding her cane. She stood at the edge of the bridge, lifting her face to the sky. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. "It's cold. Rain sounds different on the bridge," she said, "like music written for water." He sighed and took off his coat, placing it over her shoulders. She touched the fabric carefully. "Thank you," she said. "You're kind." He shook his head. "Not really." But she said softly, "Yes, you are. You just forgot how to be." For a long time, they stood together under the rain, listening to the sound of the drops falling into the river. Thomas looked at her and thought, "She listens to the world the way I used to see it, before everything broke." When the rain stopped, Clara said, "You should make a wish." Rain washes the air clean, so wishes can fly higher. He smiled sadly. "I don't believe in wishes anymore." "Then wish for that," she said. He turned to her, surprised. But she was just smiling, her hair wet, her face turned toward the sound of the flowing water. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He thought about the girl on the bridge, how she talked about the world as if she could still see it in her own way. He remembered how she said, "The stars are lonely, but they still shine." He had spent years living like a shadow. Now, because of her, he started to feel the faint warmth of light again. He found an old notebook in his drawer and wrote something on the first page. "The world doesn't end when the light goes out. Sometimes it begins when you learn to listen." Chapter 2. The Bridge Remembers. The next few weeks passed quietly. Every evening, Thomas and Clara met at the old wooden bridge. The town people started to notice, whispering about the strange pair, the blind girl and the old soldier. But neither of them cared. The bridge had become their world. Clara always arrived first. She could recognize Thomas's steps by their slow rhythm. When she heard him, she would say softly, "You're late," and he would answer, "I had to wait for the stars." They both laughed at this small ritual that made the evenings warmer. Sometimes, Clara brought her small radio. She played soft piano music while they listened to the river. Once she said, "I wish I could play this for real. I haven't had a piano since my mother died." Thomas asked, "Did she teach you?" "Yes," Clara said. "She told me that music is what light sounds like. I didn't understand it then, but now I do." Thomas nodded slowly. He could imagine her mother's gentle voice, her hands guiding Clara's on the keys. He thought of his own family, his wife, Anna, their son, Michael. He had not seen them in 10 years. The war had taken him away, not just from his country, but from himself. When he came back, Anna was gone, and Michael refused to speak to him. He had stopped trying after a while, believing some bridges could not be rebuilt. But watching Clara smile, he began to wonder if maybe some bridges still could. One evening, the wind was strong and the air smelled of rain. The sky was gray and the ducks had disappeared. Thomas arrived earlier than usual, but Clara was already there, sitting on the railing, her hands folded in her lap. "You came early," he said. "I couldn't sleep last night," Clara answered. "I dreamed of falling stars." "Is that bad?" "No," she said softly. "I think they fall to show us where to look." He looked at her face and saw how calm she seemed, though her eyes were empty. He asked, "Clara, do you ever wish you could see again?" She was silent for a long time. Then she said, I used to pray for it every day. But now I think maybe I was meant to see differently. People who can see forget to listen. People who listen never forget to feel." Thomas thought about that. He realized how many years he had looked at the world but seen nothing. That night, he told her about his past. "When I was young, I wanted to be a hero. I thought fighting for my country would make me one. But I came back with empty hands. I lost friends, my family, and the sound of my own laughter." Clara reached out carefully, touching his arm. "The world breaks everyone," she said softly, "but it also gives us people to help put the pieces back." He swallowed hard. "I don't think I deserve that kind of help." "Then you're wrong," she said. "You helped me already." "Me?" "Yes," she smiled. "You make the nights less lonely." Thomas didn't answer. The words filled a space in him that had been empty for years. After that evening, he started bringing small gifts: a red scarf, a small notebook, a single white flower. Clara accepted them with quiet joy. She never asked for anything, yet every gift made her eyes shine in a way that light itself couldn't. One night, Thomas asked, "Do you ever get afraid, walking alone here every evening?" "Sometimes," she said, "but I think fear loses power when you walk toward it." He looked at her and thought, "She has more courage than anyone I've ever known." Winter came early that year. The bridge was covered with frost, and the river below moved slower, carrying pieces of ice. Still, Clara came. She wore 2 scarves and thick gloves, but her cheeks were pink from the cold. Thomas told her, "You should stay home when it's freezing." "And miss the stars?" she said. "They sound even clearer in the cold." He laughed softly. "You're impossible. That's what my doctor says," she replied with a grin. He frowned a little. "Your doctor? Are you sick?" She hesitated. "Just tired sometimes. It's nothing serious." But her voice had changed, a little weaker, a little slower. He didn't believe her, but he didn't press. A few days later, Clara didn't come. Thomas waited on the bridge, his hands in his coat pockets, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. He waited an hour, then 2, then left with heavy steps. The next evening, she was still not there. He asked around in town. A woman who ran the bakery told him Clara had been taken to the hospital. Something with her lungs. She said, "Poor thing." She always tried to hide her cough. Thomas felt the ground move under him. He went straight to the small hospital by the hill. When he entered her room, Clara was lying on a white bed, pale but smiling. "You found me," she said weakly. "Of course I did," Thomas said. "Who else will listen to the river with me?" She laughed softly, then coughed. "I'm sorry I didn't come. The bridge must be lonely without us." "It waits for you," he said. "It remembers your footsteps." She closed her eyes. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything," he said. "If I can't come back, you'll still go to the bridge. Listen for me in the wind." "I'll be there." He couldn't speak. He just nodded. For the next 2 weeks, Thomas visited her every day. He brought her the sound of the river, recorded on his old phone. He told her about the ducks, the rain, and the way the stars looked brighter when he crossed the bridge alone. Clara smiled. "See," she said softly, "you learned to listen." He sat beside her bed, holding her hand. He wanted to tell her that she had brought him back to life, but the words stayed trapped in his throat. One evening, he came to the hospital and found her room empty. A nurse looked at him gently and shook her head. Thomas didn't cry. He just stood still, feeling the world fall silent. That night, he walked to the bridge. The sky was full of stars, and the river shone like silver. He sat on the railing where Clara used to sit and closed his eyes. He could almost hear her laugh, her voice saying, "The stars are lonely too, but they still shine." And then, for the first time in 10 years, Thomas wept. Chapter 3. The Bridge of Stars. The days after Clara's death passed slowly, like a winter that refused to end. Thomas still walked the bridge every evening. He no longer brought breadcrumbs or flowers. He just stood there, listening to the river, to the wind, to the silence that carried her memory. People in town often saw him from afar, the old soldier on the bridge, looking at nothing and everything at once. Some said he had lost his mind. Others said he was talking to ghosts. But Thomas didn't care. He knew she was there, in the sound of the flowing water, in the cool breath of the wind, in the music of the night. Sometimes he whispered softly into the darkness, hoping the stars could hear. "I still listen, Clara, every night." The river never answered, but the stars seemed to shine a little brighter when he said her name. One evening, as spring began to return, Thomas found a small letter left on the railing of the bridge. The paper was pale blue, the handwriting small but careful. It was addressed simply, "For Thomas." He opened it with trembling hands. "If you are reading this, I am already part of the wind you hear. Don't be sad for me. The stars are not gone, they have only changed places. Thank you for listening to me, for letting me be your friend. You once told me you didn't believe in wishes. So here's mine for you. Live again. Play music again. Speak to people again. Don't build walls around yourself anymore. Build bridges instead. Love, Clara." Thomas held the letter to his chest. He felt both pain and peace. She had thought of him until the end. Even when dying, she was teaching him how to live. He closed his eyes, hearing her voice in his memory. Fear loses power when you walk toward it. He looked up at the sky, where the first stars were appearing, and whispered, "Then I'll walk toward life." From that night, Thomas changed. He began fixing the bridge board by board. He brought tools, replaced broken planks, painted the railing. People watched curiously. Some offered to help. At first he refused, but later he accepted. The bridge became alive again. Laughter, footsteps, voices. Children came to feed the ducks. Couples came to watch sunsets. Musicians played violins under the moonlight. Someone asked him once why he was doing it. He answered simply, "Because someone taught me that bridges are meant to connect, not to break." When the bridge was finished, Thomas placed a small plaque near the center. It said, "The Bridge of Stars dedicated to Clara, who taught us to listen to the light." That evening, the whole town gathered there. The mayor gave a short speech, but Thomas didn't listen much. His eyes were on the sky. As the first star appeared, he imagined Clara sitting beside him. Smiling, her face turned toward the sound of the water. He whispered softly, "We did it, Clara. Your bridge shines again." The wind answered with a gentle breath that touched his cheek. He smiled through tears. Months later, Thomas bought an old piano from the town's community hall. He placed it under the roof of a small wooden shelter near the bridge. Every weekend, he played simple songs, slow and warm. People came to listen, bringing their children, their parents, their laughter. One night, while playing, he looked at the stars reflected in the water and said quietly, "The world didn't end when you left. It just learned how to begin again." He played one more song, soft like a memory carried by the river. When he finished, the wind passed over the bridge, shaking the trees lightly. For a second, he thought he heard her voice again, light as air, saying, "I told you, the stars never really leave." Years went by. Thomas grew older, but his evenings never changed. He still came to the bridge, sometimes alone, sometimes with visitors. People said he had become the soul of the bridge, the guardian of its stories. Every time someone asked about the name, he would tell them, "There was once a girl who couldn't see, but she saw the world more clearly than anyone. She taught me that listening is another kind of seeing." The listener would often smile, sometimes cry, and always look at the stars before leaving. On his last night, Thomas sat quietly on the same wooden railing where he and Clara had first talked. The moon was full, and the river moved like liquid glass. He closed his eyes and listened to the ducks, to the wind, to the music inside his heart. He whispered one last time, "Thank you, Clara, for bringing the stars back." When the morning came, people found him there, sitting peacefully, a soft smile on his face. The piano keys were still warm from the night wind. Above the bridge, the sun rose, turning the water golden, and for a brief, beautiful moment, it looked as if the stars were shining in the river one more time.